Good morning and welcome to another edition of Santos on Sports. It's Paul and Chris, and in the hot seat, sandwiched in the middle of the two Santos, is a gentleman from our hometown of Dartmouth, Massachusetts. He is a host on WEEI, big-time talk show host, very knowledgeable. We're very happy to have him here, Mr. Andy Hart. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks for having me, guys. I feel like I have the wrong last name for the show, but other than that, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, we're happy to have you, but before we get into all the sports, and there's so much to talk about, we want to get your insight to all this great stuff that's going on, especially with all of our teams and, of course, the Super Bowl coming up. But how does a kid from Dartmouth, Massachusetts, end up as a talk show host on WEEI? Because I'm sure there's a lot of kids out there like, wow, I wish I could get a job like that someday. Yep. How did you end up there?
Well, I give Tom Brady credit recently. Anybody who watched the Tuck Rule documentary on ESPN, he mentioned luck and how much of a factor luck played in his career. And people say luck is, preparation meeting opportunity. And I guess that would be me. I went to Tufts University in Medford to be an engineer and realized in my sophomore year that I didn't want to be an engineer, didn't want to take chemistry courses, didn't want to deal with numbers and all those things the rest of my life. And, started looking for other opportunities and was sort of motivated by, enough people telling me to pursue your passion. And my passion was sports. So I started looking at opportunities there and started doing some writing for the school paper at Tufts, the Daily, and then got internships and was lucky enough to get an internship with the Patriots in their PR department. And when that closed up after the 2001 season, when I was a season-long intern, and that was obviously the great Super Bowl run, was able to make the jump over to Patriots.com, Patriots Football Weekly, the team newspaper. And I was there for 17 years, I guess, and had done fill-in radio and a lot of things for WEEI before I jumped over to WEEI full-time about 3 years ago. And
hey, Andy, I bet, are you there?
Yes.
There was a slight, I just have to start over again. I apologize.
Okay. No problem.
I'm trying to be the producer and the director at the same time. Goodness, okay. This is good. So we only lost 2 minutes, so that's not bad. All right, Here we go. Sorry about that. Hello and welcome to Santos on Sports. Alongside Chris Santos, I'm Paul Santos, and sandwiched in the middle between the two Santos is our guest of honor. He is from Dartmouth, Massachusetts. He is a talk show host at WEEI up in Boston. Very knowledgeable gentleman, very interesting gentleman. It is Andy Hart. Welcome, Andy.
Welcome to me. Yes, my name's not Jackson. Just so nobody gets confused. That's not my jersey, just my hero growing up. So don't get confused.
Yeah, you grew up in the Bo Jackson era, which is always a fun thing to look back at. The thing I'm interested in is how does a guy from Dartmouth end up as a talk show host in sports at WEEI, which a lot of sports fans would say, boy, I'd love to be able to do that, be able to talk sports. How did that all happen?
A lot of luck involved. I've been very fortunate because a lot of people that work in this business, sports media, radio, have to bounce around the country and really, work their way up from low levels. And I was fortunate. I've always lived in Massachusetts, went to school at Tufts University, originally as an engineer before I decided I didn't want to be an engineer, that chemistry classes weren't for me. Looking for a second path, I guess, not knowing really what I wanted to do. I knew I loved sports, had played sports all my life, had played football at Tufts, and started to go into the sports media communications area. And through internships, working at the Tufts Daily, New England Cable News, then getting an internship with the Patriots in their PR department, things kind of just snowballed for me. It's the classic example of just sort of trying to work hard and impress people and make connections. And, I was able to get Dan Kraft, who's an alumni at Tufts, was able to, obviously, has some pull with the Patriots organization, was able to get me a job there in the PR department. And the first Super Bowl, 2001, I was their graduate assistant all year in PR. I was on the sideline for every game that year with Tom Brady and that whole evolution. And then I started working for Patriots.com, Patriots Football Weekly, the team newspaper. Did that for 17, 18 years. And along the way, started doing a lot of radio fill-in work for WEEI. And a couple of years ago, they hired me full-time to do some writing on their website and to do a lot of various radio shifts. I feel like I'm kind of their they're Brock Holt. I do middays, I do afternoons, I do nights, I do weekends. But I love it because I like writing, but I also really, really enjoy the talking sports, the talking to other people. I think there's an energy involved with live radio that is pretty much unique to that medium. And I've really been fortunate enough to get into it.
Andy, it's a great story about telling the young kids, get out there and get involved. Don't sit there and think it's going to come to you. You got to pursue it. You got to take the first step. You got to reach out and make all the communications. And as you said, a lot of internships. It's a lot of tech savvy nowadays. These kids right now getting into the field or trying to say, well, maybe this isn't for me. I can do something else. Just don't sit there and wait. Look at an experience like what you've been through and get out there and create yourself. And it can be easily done in today's world.
No question. And you can, a long time ago when you start talking about communications, they tell you, well, if you want to write, then write every day, write at home, write a journal, just write, start getting used to that. I would say the same thing just in general. Whatever it is you want to do, try to do it. Start doing it. Whether it's a podcast, the technology, as you mentioned, the technology is there for you want to blog, you want a podcast, and also just reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing that can happen is they ignore your email, they ignore your letter, they say no, or we don't have. But you may have a 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 100 chance that, like me, Dan Kraft calls you 2 days later and says, what do you want to do? And opens up a door of opportunity for you. And I know even in a lot of the local schools and the DC TV programs in Dartmouth. And I actually was having a conversation with the athletic director at Dartmouth the other day about they're trying to do more in this area. Okay, we're broadcasting games. Well, if we're going to broadcast games, why wouldn't we have students learn broadcasting and directing and producing and play-by-play and color? Just say yes. Just say yes to any opportunity. Don't be afraid. That's something I learned that I wasn't great at, didn't come naturally to me, is networking and asking for internships and help. But generally, I think it pays off. And I think you'd be surprised with how many people, especially from what I've seen in the sports communication industry, are welcome to questions and helping young people get their foot in the door.
Well, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, if you want to talk sports with us and Andy Hart, give us a shout, 774-301-9432. Shout out to Mikey Mono looking in this morning, Rick Levy from Manhattan, Chris Giblin from Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Give us a call and chat with us and talk sports with our guest of honor here, Mr. Andy Hart. Before we get into all the stuff that's happening, I always ask people this because this intrigues me, right? You're talking about standing on the sidelines with Tom Brady. You actually get to know these people a little bit more personally, obviously, whether it's Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, those big names that we hear. And, of course, on the radio, Wiggins. I like listening to Wiggins or Hill in the morning there, Greg Hill's show. Fourier, even on the other station, the Felgers and people like that, and Michael Hawley. I've seen you on that show before. What are the athletes like, and what are some of these media celebrities like in person? Like, how have you found these folks to work with?
I mean, generally, everybody's really good. I always say this. A lot of people ask, "Oh, you're in the Patriots locker room for 20 years doing the interviews," and pre-COVID, obviously, it's a little bit of a different world now with everything on Zoom, but 90 out of 100, 99 out of 100 are good guys, normal guys, guys that are just willing to BS with you. Do you get a jerk every now and then? Sure. But, I think that falls in line with any industry. It doesn't matter where you are. You can find some jerks work there. Just good people. Because I think I've always said this, we're all working in sports. We all chose a career or we're talented in an area that's sports. And there's something fun about that. We're not curing cancer. We're not fighting COVID. We're not doing life and death issues. And I think a lot of the personalities in sports, you see that. They're people that enjoy life, enjoy what they do, have been fortunate enough. Coach Belichick says it all the time. He hasn't worked a day in his life. He's 69 years old, works 350 days a year for 20 hours a day and believes he hasn't worked a day in his life. Why? Because it's football. You never had to grow up really. You're still in the world of football. So I've most people you come across, and certainly the guys at our station, Christian Fourier, Jermaine Wiggins, the ex-athletes, no air of anything about them, just nice guys who, again, I think they realize I had it pretty good. I came in at the right time with Tom Brady and I had a nice career, and and now I'm talking sports for a living, and we be able to turn football into a broadcasting career. So I think generally most people in this industry are very, very lucky and fortunate, and they know that, and that comes across in their personalities.
Andy, is it like being like starstruck for the first time, but then after the first time, it's like, this is nothing. These guys are just, the average Joe, and I can be right there with them. But when it's the first one, like, oh boy, it's Tom Brady. I'm nervous. I got to be careful what I say. But then after that, you get through that first, whether it's a column, whether it's an interview, after that, you just settle right in because you realize what kind of people they are.
Yeah, I would say you settle in for the most part. Bill Belichick is still a different beast to me. When you ask Bill Belichick a question in a press conference, your heartbeat races a little.
Yeah.
You're thinking, you're choosing your words because
Sure.
if you say the wrong word, he's going to pounce on it, or he's going to pounce on you. And I would say Brady, Tom Brady, even though I was around him for 20 years and you're doing press conferences twice a week, Wednesday, and then after the game, you still realize this is Babe Ruth. This is Ted Williams. This is Bobby Orr. This is Wayne Gretzky. You're around an historic figure. You're part of it. You're living this historic run. So I think those guys are still a little bit different, but the rest, the other 99.9%, yeah, you just learn what Devin McCourty's personality is or what Gronk's personality is. And these just genuinely good guys that also happen to be, supremely gifted at what they do. The one thing I will say, if there is one downside to the job, and as you mentioned, being so close to it, I do think it takes away a little bit of your fan passion. Being there every day, it does become a job, or it does become, and I think that's an interesting, not that I don't like it, because I still love it. I still feel like, I have these conversations with my wife, and, she'll come home kind of complaining about her job or something. And I'll say, yeah, me too. And she goes, you talked about sports on the radio today. What are you complaining about? I was like, don't blame me because I picked something I love. Don't, just that's your issue to deal with. And it's true. Like if I have a sports world annoying day, like maybe, I don't know, the topic didn't excite me, or a couple callers were jerks or something, but it's like that commercial. What's that Florida marketing thing? A good day in Florida is better than a bad day pretty much everywhere else, or whatever. Or a bad day in Florida is better than a good day everywhere. That's kind of how I look at it. A bad day in, radio and sports media, it's not like a bad day if you're a, construction worker and it's, 30 degrees out and raining and you're digging a ditch to lay a pipe or something. A bad day in sports is still a pretty damn good day.
Yep.
All right. Well, give us a call, 774-301-9432. We got a comment here from Jim Duvall. He says he absolutely loves WEEI. He's a big fan of Wiggy. And he actually says that he called and spoke to you, Andy, on WEEI during one of your shows. He's also a photographer. And his dream job is he's got a few photos of Tom Brady out there. So he's really enjoying that a little bit. So, hey, give us a call, Jim, and talk to Andy, who is right here in the middle of us here on Santos on Sports. Okay, since we started with football, I'm looking at the Patriots. Obviously, it's really hard to follow up, that dynasty, and of course the whole Tom Brady thing has been talked about over and over and over. But this is the way I look at it. Every time they talk about the Patriots, they always talk about Mac Jones, right? Hey, the focus is always going to be on the quarterback. So Chris and I talk about it all the time. Why there's a whole bunch of other people on the team that make a successful team or not, So you look at something like I don't know, some of these other teams like Brady's throwing to Evans and Godwin, Mahomes is throwing to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, Stafford's throwing to Cooper Kupp, Rodgers is throwing to Adams, right? And who's Mac Jones throwing to? Nobody like that. When Brady was there the last time, he couldn't do anything either, right? So to me, I'm looking at Mac Jones. I'm saying, hey, man, I think the kid did great given the hand that he was dealt. I mean, if you took Tom Brady, wrapped him up with Johnny Unitas and, Dan Marino and the greatest quarterbacks of all time and wrapped him into a superhuman quarterback, but your defense gives up 7 touchdowns on 7 possessions, you're going to go winless. So yep. They really need to fix that defense because that defense was god-awful horrible.
Yeah, this is something I talk about a lot. Like the defense in particular is a funny topic because I don't know if you guys heard Gerard Mayo sort of making the rounds as a promotional thing for Hellman's mayonnaise, which seems so obvious for so many of us for so long that Gerard Mayo would have a deal with mayonnaise. But he was talking about as a defensive coach, they know their failings. They know they didn't make the Bills punt in consecutive games. They know that. But when you look on paper in the totality of their season, it's like, wow, they finished in the top 5 in points allowed and red zone and third down and so many statistical categories. And, this is an analytical world where people put a lot of premium on numbers. And then you're like, but wait a minute, I watched the games, and when they needed a stop, they didn't get a stop. When they weren't good. Like, the numbers can tell me they're good, but they weren't good when they needed to be good. And that's why I laugh. I don't know if you guys saw, Keyshawn Johnson was very critical yesterday of Mac Jones on our morning show, the Greg Hill Show.
Yep.
And I don't know how good he's going to be. I mean, none of us do. But he had a defense that I think we all saw fail when they needed to not fail through most of the year. He, as Paul mentions, didn't have a go-to guy. I think his job was as hard as any quarterback that made the playoffs. He couldn't just dump it off to Tyreek Hill and say, hey, Tyreek, how about you go 40 and flip the field for me? He didn't have a guy that he knew could win a one-on-one battle, even like Brady's had for most of his career in New England, whether it was Gronkowski, Edelman, Welker, Moss, guys that he felt really confident they're going to beat the guy across from him. I thought Mac Jones had to really do the old, my favorite receiver is the open receiver, go through his reads on every play. And that's a lot of pressure on a rookie quarterback. And he won 10 games. He made the postseason. He earned a Pro Bowl berth for whatever that's worth, I guess, in this day and age. But I thought he had a good year. And I'm kind of with Paul. If you tell me you fix the defense and you go out and get him a Pro Bowl caliber something, whether it's a slot receiver, a tight end like, not Gronk because he's the greatest ever, but let's look at Kelsey and Kittle and these guys that have security blankets. I think you get him that, then you can say, okay, now I expect more of you. Now it's not just good enough to make the playoffs and get blown out. Now you need to win in the playoffs. So I've become a bit of a defender of Mac Jones because I think the bar is just unreal that people, because of Brady, because of the Patriots, and then because of Josh Allen, who, wait a minute, Josh Allen is in year 5 and you gave him Stephon Diggs. And wow, it's the weirdest thing. You gave him Stephon Diggs and his career took off. He becomes an MVP candidate. So,
hey, Andy,
defender.
I'm glad you and I are in agreement on that. I mean, it makes you feel good because, a big-time talk show host, we're lining up over here. Hey, but we do have a call here, so let's see what we got here. Good morning. You are on Santos on Sports with Paul, Chris, and Andy Hart.
Good morning, gentlemen.
How are you?
Good, very good. I may have missed this information, but so I apologize if he's going to repeat it or not. But my question is for Andy. I have a son that goes to Dean College. He majors in communication, has his own podcast, and he's doing all the things that you talked about, working hard. Andy, and maybe you mentioned this, and I apologize. Where did you get your training? Did you get a degree? Did you go to college? And what did you get your degree in?
So I went to Tufts University in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. I got a degree in English. I took part in their communications program, which was a minor. And then I did writing at the school newspaper. I interned at New England Cable News, and that kind of led to an internship with the Patriots, which led to more full-time employment with the Patriots and their media relations department and then their website. So I kind of worked that track. And I know Dean has a good program. They're actually affiliated with the Patriots. I think John Rook, who people probably know from, he's the guy who says another Patriots first down at Gillette Stadium and all those things. I know he does some classes over there and has students over there. So the Dean program definitely opens some doors for kids, and I would say take full advantage of that. But I'm also, I used the word earlier, luck. I mean, there is some luck involved because I don't know the statistics. I'm not an HR person, but I got to think for every job in the sports media industry, there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are looking to fill that job, whether it's in front of the camera, behind the camera, at the keyboard, at the microphone. So it's a very competitive industry. So you got to kind of do the best you can, work hard, and have a little good fortune mixed in.
Yeah, I agree with that. He also has a small stint when he can. He goes to school, he plays football.
Yep.
When he can, he gets back to broadcast some games on New Bedford Cable as well.
Nice.
But thank you for that information. I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you very much for calling, and thank you for being a loyal listener.
Yeah, no, it's great when you hear that. And I will say, even guys like Bob Sosi, who does the Patriots games for the Sports Hub, you look back at when they were young, and you hear so many times, oh, I used to sit in my room and pretend I was broadcasting the game, and I would, talking to a shoe or whatever the heck it was, or a tape recorder, and go back and listen to themselves. Well, now with technology, you can put that out there, or you can, work local college games, local high school games. I think there are a lot more opportunities, certainly in the play-by-play industry and color industry and things of that nature, to pursue, rather than just preparing by sitting in front of the mirror and pretending you're actually doing it. You can actually get experience these days.
Andy, I got two questions for you. First, let's get back with Mac Jones and your first impression when he came into camp, and then your impressions of him throughout the season, all the way up to the end. I want your take on that. And then number two, you talked about other quarterbacks who got players like a Stephon Diggs. Remember, Bill went out and got Hunter Henry. Bill went out and got Jonas Smith. Bill went out and got such and such. They went try to get these players when Newton said, I need people to work with. And then he got some players. I don't think those guys lived up to the expectations that maybe Bill thought they would have. So I want to say that they wanted to do that. What's your take on those two things right there?
Well, first of all, with Mac Jones, I thought he was impressive from day one. And I'm not just talking about throwing passes. The guy, I'll use Cam Newton's word. Cam Newton's word when he got cut was, I'm gone because of my aura. My aura would be too much around a young quarter, whatever. I think Mac Jones has an aura to him. You see spring practices, OTAs, mini camps, and the interactions he had with teammates, and not just the running back or the wide receiver, but Matt Judon, the star $50 million pass rusher they bring in, immediately seemed to have this weird positive rapport with this rookie quarterback. And you're like, that's interesting. That's two very different personalities and backgrounds and places in their career. The fact that he was interacting with those people, immediately I noticed. And I'm a big believer in that. If you go back to Bill Belichick, he talks about in 2000, Tom Brady leading that rookie class, the natural leadership he had. I think Mac Jones has that. I'll tell you, the next word I hear from a teammate that's negative about Mac Jones will be the first. That it's nothing but positive. The leader, the man he is, the toughness, the way the swagger, even, that I think we're now seeing more of. I'm a believer that this year under Belichick, who can be so domineering and controlling, I don't think you saw the real Mac Jones. I think you saw the rookie Mac Jones, who was kind of falling in line with the quote unquote Patriot way. Mm-hmm. And I thought even, Paul referenced earlier the Bills loss in the playoffs. I thought that his post-game press conference after that was a different Mac Jones. You got a taste of a guy talking about, I'm not the little brother anymore. I need to be the big brother. I need to lead and bring guys with me this offseason. Mm-hmm. And I think you've seen even the Pro Bowl. He was, among stars, and his personality shone. And he was, if you watch the mic'd up segment, there was no timidness or fear. He belonged there in terms of personality and confidence. I think you're going to see that evolve and grow and see a different Mac Jones in that area in year two. And I think you need that. The quarterback's the leader. You're going to go where your quarterback takes you. So I like to brag a little bit. I like to pat myself on the back a little bit. And I believe the date was June 15th that I anointed him the starter, because all of these things I just saw, don't waste time with Cam Newton anymore. Invest in this guy. He is the future. He is the present. And I think he met every challenge along the way. So that's where I get back to, not really sure what the criticism is of a rookie quarterback who did everything you asked him to do. I got
to tell you, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because, on the outside, we can't see it as close as you can. But how many times in sports do we say, this guy has the it factor? You can't even really quantify it. You can look at statistics all day long, and it doesn't tell you that this guy has the it factor. And of course, Tom Brady, right? Yeah. Who would you want to have the ball with 2 minutes left? Like we talk about it with the other sports too. Like, who would you rather have at the plate with the bases loaded? Big Papi, probably, or somebody like that. Reggie Jackson, Derek Jeter, somebody who rises to the occasion for that moment. If you just look at statistics, you don't see that. So I'm really glad that as someone who's close to it, you are seeing that in Mac Jones. And now if the Patriots can just get a defense and, get some players around him that he can throw to, which any quarterback needs. That's another thing that frustrates you. They always say, well, you're saying Mac Jones isn't good unless you give him help. Nobody's any good if you don't give him help.
Right.
So
right.
I'm glad to hear you say that he seems to have that leadership quality and that it factor, because that's that goes a long way in sports, especially from the quarterback position.
Yeah, if Mac Jones fails to become great, not fails, because I don't think he'll fail. I think at worst he's a solid NFL quarterback. But if he fails to achieve quote unquote greatness or win a Super Bowl, whatever, I don't think it'll be because of his personality, his confidence, his work ethic. It may be because he does have limitations physically. He doesn't have the strongest arm, and maybe that is just, or the right pieces don't end up around him. And that gets back to the question about, Bill did invest in the offensive side of the ball this past offseason with, I would say, some relative hits and then some significant misses. And that's why I think heading into this year is interesting. How much can you reinvest in offense? How much do you have to, as Paul says, invest in defense this offseason to improve that side of the ball? I think the biggest swing and miss was Jonnu Smith. I think Josh McDaniels, who's now gone, but I think Jonnu Smith was supposed to be the sort of the centerpiece of the offense. I think he was, from everything I saw in mini camps and training camp, they were getting him the ball in a variety of ways, lining him up in the backfield, inline tight end, wing back, out wide, slot, feeding him the ball, getting him the ball in space. They invested a lot of time in the summer in, I thought he was going to be a 100 catch, 80 catch, 1,000-yard receiver, and it just didn't work. I mean, we all saw it, unfortunately, on the game field. I feel like every play he was involved in just didn't look quite right, or he didn't look quite comfortable, or he'd stumble, or, that hellacious interception, I think it was against the Saints, where they tried to run a little screen. It's in the air. It's picked. It's a touchdown for the other team. And it's just, I'm still, people like to paint me as a negative guy, but I'm still trying to stay positive with him. Maybe, the quote unquote year 2 jump in the system feels more comfortable, but he and Nelson Aguilar, that was, $20+ million a year on the salary cap that you didn't get a lot of return on that investment. So if you would use that money differently, more wisely elsewhere, because Hunter Henry is a really good player, but he's not Travis Kelce or Gronk. He's not a transformational offensive weapon. But I think you got good value to some degree, or at least free agent value. You overpay in free agency. Right. But Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, I'd say those are hits. Jonnu Smith, a terrible, terrible miss. And Nelson Aguilar, just coming off a career year. That seemed like a bad contract the day they signed it.
Well, let's play GM now, head coach, either one that you want, Andy. You're the Patriots in the offseason. Where do you start to get back to what you want? Where are you going in the draft for a picks? Where are you going for free agency? What do you think they are going to be looking at this offseason to maybe get things back in track the way they want to? What is your big thought of where Bill and Kraft and the rest are looking into?
Well, you know what they say, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I think we're on the right track, all of us as a public. Like, they need a number one weapon, and they need speed and playmakers on defense. They need guys at the second and third level. Linebacker, you need to be faster. You need more playmakers. You watch some of these other teams and their defenses. The Bucs defense is the one I used from a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah. Tom Brady won the Super Bowl. That's right.
Yes.
But I think that Bucs defense really was the story of that team. And
totally
Levante David and Devin White, you look at those guys and you go, Patriots don't have anything that looks anything like that. And no, those guys go high in the draft. Those guys are hard to get. I understand all that, but you got to try to find one. The thing I keep going, like, if you legitimately made me the GM and I said, I get to make the decisions, I got money, I got draft picks, what am I doing? The question I would ask myself is, am I thinking now or long-term? Am I thinking 2 or 3 year plan, or is my owner chirping in my ear? He wants to, Brady won, I want to get back to winning playoff games. Because if I'm thinking long-term, the idea that Jamison Williams, the wide receiver out of Alabama, coming off an ACL, could be available with the 21st pick in the draft to the Patriots, to me is a dream scenario. To me, that's kind of Gronkowski-esque. Rob Gronkowski's back injury or why you got him in the second round and why he became a great playmaker for Tom Brady. I think Jameson Williams, Alabama connection, great playmaker, all the talent in the world if you're willing to wait, because he's probably not going to be a huge contributor in 2022. I think that would be a great long-term pick. We talk about it. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, college teammates that you pair up with a long-term view of, nope, I could have taken an offensive lineman to protect him, but this league is about quarterbacks, playmaking, and pass catchers. I would do that, and then I would try to figure out some of the other stuff. I also, we haven't talked about this guy, maybe it's just too deep in the weeds, but J.C. Jackson, their cornerback who's headed towards free agency, I've come around on. I think you need to sign him. I think we've seen for 20 years, if you have a Belichick defense that's any good, it has a number one cornerback.
Shut down corner.
Ty Law, Asante Samuel, Darrell Revis, Malcolm Butler. Every time they're good, every time they go to a Super Bowl, you look out and there's somebody who's a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber corner. I know it's a lot of money. It's not my money. It's Robert's money, Robert Kraft's money, so I can spend it. J.C. Jackson, I think, needs to be re-signed.
Well, you mentioned before, too, about, the Tampa Bay defense being great, and we're going to get a bunch of comments that I want to get to, but I just want to say about when Brady threw 3 interceptions in one half and they still won the game anyway, and nobody remembers it. Imagine if Mac Jones threw 3 interceptions in one pass in one half, they'd be torturing him. So again, and you listed a bunch of Hall of Famers there. How many Hall of Famers that those teams that Tom Brady was fortunate enough to lead? And I'm not taking anything away from him like you, but you got to peel the layers back and do a little bit of work and give credit to some of these other great players. Okay, by the way, Mr. Guarantee is watching. So hello to Mark out there in Chicago, Illinois. Give us a call if you'd like. By the way, Andy, the reason why we call this gentleman Mr. Guarantee is because that last game against the Patriots, against Buffalo, he guaranteed a Patriot win. So we've been calling him Mr. Guarantee ever since. But he's a great guy and he's a great sports fan.
He is.
So he's commenting. Bobby O'Brien says, Andy does a great job on WEEI. He and Keefe would be a great midday team. So he's trying to don't start any controversy here. Don't start any controversy. You'd be better than Zoe and Beadle and all these other guys. So he's giving you a big compliment there. And Don Silver is watching. Thank you. Philip McDonald says, hey, your show's moving up. You got Andy Hart as a guest. That's the idea. And let's see. Oh, the question that Mark had.
Yep.
Well, how much of an impact is losing McDaniels going to be on Mac Jones? I mean, you can get other good offensive coordinators, but being able to gel with that guy your first year and then boom, he's gone. What do you think about that?
It's certainly less than ideal. And now, as we see the replacement plan, I guess, come to fruition, and it certainly looks like Joe Judge. He was brought back, their former special teams coach, former Giants head coach, who was fired. He's been brought back as an offensive assistant. I quite frankly don't really understand it. And I know, Bill Belichick's a genius and sometimes genius walks alone. But I have a lot of doubts because you talk about the quarterback, a young quarterback going into his second year. This is the key developmental portion of his career. And I just wonder what kind of tutelage advice. Joe Judge, smart guy, good football mind, has worked for Saban and Belichick. Okay, I trust all that. But he's never called an offensive play. He's never been in the heat of the battle with what goes into that. So I have, and I'm a big Josh McDaniels guy. I go way back with he and I started with the Patriots the same time. We used to sit on the team plane next to each other, and I'd see him breaking down film and different things. So I'm biased. I like him personally. I also think he has a wealth of experience in that role. And I'm a big believer experience matters. There's value in that. He's called plays in almost every situation possible from week 1 through a Super Bowl and, with various personnel. I don't know that you can learn that on the fly. Like I think Joe Judge is going to try to do this spring and summer and be prepared to help Mac Jones develop. So I am, and you combine that with some uncertainty on the defensive side of the ball in terms of coaching. And even if you have the ultimate faith in Bill Belichick to be the fixer above it all, sort of on the coaching depth chart, he's going to be a 70-year-old man who, we use that phrase, could he be spread too thin? Is he still capable of filling so many voids and holes on his coaching staff? So, yeah, I have a lot of concerns about Mac Jones's coaching and what he's going to have working around him this year. I do.
Andy, any word on Bill O'Brien being maybe involved there, or is that just something that's a rumor?
I think there was some interest. I think Ian Rappaport, the NFL Network, reported there was some mutual interest in both directions, but for whatever reason, and no one's told me it didn't work out. That's not going to work, and that this may be the staff. Joe Judge filling in as an offensive assistant, and sort of the return of the guys that were here last year, Mick Lombardi and Nick Cayley, assistant coaches, are going to be in whatever that mix is to create the coaching staff. And I wouldn't have any concerns if Billy O'Brien were coming back. I think he's a really good offensive coach. He had success here with Brady at a really high level, but also has had success in college, would bring potentially some of that Alabama system that Mac is familiar with. I know a lot of people want to see more Alabama RPOs and play action passing game. There was a lot of, I think, excitement, even some of the McDaniels haters, and he has his share of haters, even though he was really successful here for so long in New England. Some of the McDaniels haters thought, bring Billy O'Brien back, that'll be an upgrade. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And Mac is stuck with, or left with, I shouldn't say stuck, that was a negative term, is left with the coaches that he has to work with right now.
Also, so a second stint there with for Josh McDaniels. I believe Denver was the first one.
Yep.
And then he came back to New England. Now second stint goes with the Raiders. How do you see him fitting in with Vegas?
I think it's a good opportunity for him. I don't know if it's the perfect job, because the quarterback situation there is interesting. You have Derek Carr going into the last year of his contract. Derek Carr's a good NFL quarterback. I don't know if he's a great NFL quarterback. I don't know what level you can reach with him, and I don't know what Josh thinks of him, but I think Vegas is a really interesting opportunity in a big picture sense, in that it's a growing market. The Raiders are a team that used to, I think, kind of get by the string of their teeth in terms of budget when they were in Oakland. Now I think they're kind of a big market team. There's a lot of financial opportunities there that should allow them to pursue free agents and lure people into the market that is Vegas, which has its pros and cons. And they've already learned that very firsthand in terms of some of the issues they've had off the field with players. But I think Josh learned a lot from his mistakes the first time trying to be mini Bill Belichick. And I think Josh McDaniels will now be Josh McDaniels and succeed or fail on his own personality and his own coaching acumen. So I'm optimistic that Josh will make it work.
All right, 774-301-9432. Mr. Guarantee, you're welcome to call in, and anyone else who's watching this morning can talk to Andy Hart of WEEI. A couple of quick questions here that came in the comment line. Rui Pereira is asking, does Jones have the upside of a Burrow, an Allen, or a Lawrence? And then Tony Cameron is asking, who does Andy have in the Super Bowl, the Rams or the Bengals? Yeah. All right, so there you go. There's a couple of questions. And before you answer the Rui Pereira question about Jones having the upside of Burrow, Allen, and Lawrence, I hear a lot of people talking about, well, this guy can run over here, and this guy can run over there, and that guy can run over there. Yeah, where can Tom Brady run? How far can Tom Brady run? You know what I mean? So I always get back to that. But to answer that question, Burrow, Allen, and Lawrence, can Matt get to that point?
I mean, if you say the point is, can he compete for a Super Bowl? I think he can. He can't do it the way they do it. They're better athletes than him. Even Burrow, I think, is a better athlete than Mac Jones. I think he's more of an ab libber and a play creator at times, even if you go back and watch some of his LSU days. And I'm a big Joe Burrow fan. I fell in love with Joe Burrow at LSU. I thought he showed signs of being special, and I think he's still showing signs of being special. I'm not ready to anoint him the next Tom Brady or anything like that, but I think you could have a quarterback that is a sort of a tent pole figure in the National Football League for the next decade plus, to go along with some others, and Josh Allen. Now, physically, Josh Allen, my co-host on night shifts on WEEI, Mike Mutmanansky, made the comparison to Elway early on with Josh Allen.
Yep.
And I kind of mocked him because, Elway is this mythical figure in NFL lore. Like, people forget how good he was, and the strong arm, and, the stories he would leave cross marks on people's chest because he threw the ball so hard and could run by you, could run over you. And then I watched Allen, and I was like, you know what? Allen has all those abilities. I don't want to label him the next Elway, because you're talking about a top 5 or 10 all-time quarterback there. But all the things he can do, and especially when he says, you know what, the game is on the line, I'm going to run you over. I'm going to forget about whether I get hurt, I'm going to run you over. And we saw it against the Patriots. Like, there were times where he just said, I'm the best player on the field, and I'm going to prove it right now with my arm, with my legs, with my size, with my everything. Can Mac Jones be that? No, because he wasn't born with that. He doesn't run like that. He's not that big. He doesn't have the arm. But I'm also not one that says you can't win with a pocket passer in the NFL. Why the hell can't I win with a pocket passer? There's different ways to win in football. And I think with the right team around him and the right situation, I'll tell you, I think we talked about it earlier. I think he reads defenses in year one probably as well or better than Josh Allen reads defenses in year 5. The difference
we saw a quarterback who shall remain nameless win 7 Super Bowls being a pocket passer. So let's start with that. By the way, let's go to your phones right here. Good morning. You're on Santos on Sports.
Hey, how we doing, guys?
How you doing?
I love your show. I love everything that's going. Andy, how you doing, buddy? I got a
Great.
question for you, Andy. You've worked so much in the Patriots organization. Okay, now with McDaniels leaving and bringing somebody else, is that going to change him and change his approach? Is that I think that's the words I'm looking for. Like, you're used to one person working for you, and now you have to learn and put trust into somebody else. How does that work as a quarterback?
I think it's important. I mean, these are still people. That's one thing I always get back to is we've pretended for so long that Tom Brady's a robot or Bill Belichick's a robot or this receiver's they're still people, and there's relationships.
Yes.
And I think that's huge. And I think that trust factor, and like even Billy O'Brien, who I thought would have been the perfect replacement for McDaniels, there's a different personality. He's a hothead at times. So how would that have melded? How would that have melded with Mac? How is Mac going to meld with Joe Judge, who it looks like is going to be a really key figure on the offensive staff, who can be loud? Anybody who's ever been to training camp practices when Joe Judge was on special teams, nobody drops more F-bombs on the practice field than Joe Judge. I don't know how Mac Jones will react when he hears his first, second, or third F-bomb from Joe Judge.
But could it destroy his ego? Like, he just had one of the greatest offensive coaches, and now he's got to learn to do a different system. Like, when you come into something like, it's like martial arts. If you go into with working with one person and then go into another and change your whole system, can that affect him really? Could it ruin his career?
It could, but the Patriots won't change their system. That's the one thing. The system will stay the same. The system has been the same since 2001 when Belichick and Weiss created. So the terminology is going to be the same. The pass protections are going to be the same. The route principles are going to be the same. The play calling will be different. Some of the formations will be different depending on their personnel. The voice calling the plays will be different. But the foundation of the offense that Mac has already learned in his first year here, the foundation will stay the same. And that's why I don't think it's disaster waiting to happen. It may not be ideal the way it plays out this year, but I don't think it'll be a disaster, because I do think when you change systems and terminology and playbook and scheme with young quarterbacks, I think at times you can ruin young quarterbacks. Some of these guys that have had, 3 offensive coordinators in their first 4 years in the NFL, and then you say, wow, they're a bust. Well, yeah. I mean, would you rather they be in Spanish 400 or Spanish 100, then Portuguese 100, then French 100? There's a reason they can't speak the language. You keep changing the language.
Right. But it's funny, Andy. I mean, like I said, I live right down the road from you, and I've watched Mac Jones all year, and now Belichick's getting older. So everything's going to change in maybe the next 2 years, 5 years. So is the Patriots way going to still be the same? Meaning, like, the guys that are still younger, Belichick's going to be almost 70 years old. God bless his soul. But you're still going to have the same enforcement with the new guys coming in.
All right, let's get Andy's response, and we really appreciate the call. Call again.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I agree with him on everything's going to change soon. I actually got into just a debate. I say fight because it's a sports fight, debate, whatever it may be. But with Tom Curran on TV about this, because he was talking about Belichick's 5-year plan. And I said, 5-year plans for guys that are 70 years old that are becoming the oldest coaches in the history of the game. I know it's a new world and 70 is the new 60 or whatever it may be. I just think 5-year plans are a little optimistic for somebody of that age. So I agree with the caller. I think things are going to change dramatically some point in the next 3-4 years. Gerard Mayo is even saying, the ideal situation for him would be to become the head coach of the New England Patriots. If that happens, then I think you'll see a lot of carryover. He played in New England. He coaches in New England. He's a New England guy. You'll probably see a lot of similarities moving forward. Now, if he moves on before then, and then Jonathan Kraft takes over sort of ownership role and all the decision making, and he decides to clean house, yeah, that's a lot of changes. And that's the business of professional sports. That's why part of the story of the Patriots' greatness, the dynasty, was how remarkable it was that Belichick never ran out of energy, never wanted to move on. Heck, if you guys read the headlines, 36-year-old Sean McVay, who's in the Super Bowl tomorrow, is talking about he doesn't know how much longer he wants to do this. He's 36 years old. Bill Belichick's going strong at 69. So it's remarkable that Bill has stayed so long without burnout. They had Brady for so long. But the reality of the NFL is usually either your coach stinks and you fire him, or your coach is really good, wins the Super Bowl, and then decides he wants to do something else. He's a little burnt out. Your quarterback, like, to have the stability that was here for 20 years, as Matthew Slater said, that's not NFL reality. You were living a dream dynasty.
Andy, why can't some of these coaches who have been under Bill Belichick then leave, become a head coach, been with the dynasty, know all the ins and outs of that organization, but yet can't run another team and perform like what the Patriots did when they were at New England? You talk about that Belichick aura and how he develops coaches. How come them coaches can't leave there, go somewhere else, and maybe, become knowing what Belichick knows and really work for them? What is it that Bill has that they just can't get to that next level when they leave?
Bill has a cachet and a success and a credibility that those guys don't have. And generally, when you take over a team, you're walking into a situation that's less than ideal. They weren't good, or they would have kept the guy before you. Now, Detroit was a little different with Patricia. They had actually had a winning record before they switched to Patricia. So that's a little, but generally you're taking over a team that's like a 4-win team, 3-win team. And so you need to turn it around quick. If there isn't winning immediately, then all the natural egos and nitpicking and emotions that come with losing point back to you. You can have a toxic environment. And I think Bill Belichick is very open with, he's not an easy guy to play for. Patriots isn't an easy place to play. But because they win, people accept the challenges of being a Patriot for the most part. And some guys love it. Adrian Phillips, guys like that come in from other places, they love it. You work hard, you take care of your business, and you win games, is what he said. Well, if you don't win games and you're working hard and you're taking care of your business, human nature is, well, why aren't we winning? Is it his fault? Is he? And that, I think those fingers start to point at some of these coaches when they try to rebuild. And honestly, Bill hasn't had to face that. Even early on here, 5-11 in 2000.
Right.
And then boom, Tom Brady gets in the lineup when Bledsoe goes down. They start winning. They win a Super Bowl. Now you have the cachet of a Super Bowl ring. Brady has a Super Bowl ring. That next year, remember, they missed the playoffs. I think they were 9-7, but it doesn't matter. We got a Super Bowl. We're building something special. Then the year after that, now it's snowballing. You have all the respect. For the assistants, I feels like they never got to that chance because the negative snowballs against them. And I do think there is there's an aura around the league now where when these coaches arrive, if they're too much of a hardo, quote unquote, if they're too much of a Belichick, there's a pushback. Like, you act like Belichick, but you show me that you're a genius, and then I'll treat you like a genius. Yeah. I know Bill's a genius. He's done it for 20 years. He's done it in different ways. Even the Cam Newton year, the lowest he's dealt with is 7-9. And he felt criticism from the outside, and there were people, some issues. Then the next year, boom, rookie quarterback back in the playoffs. You're heading in the right direction again. So he has been able to stay above the adversity, I would say.
Yeah, you make a great point there. You can't be Mr. Hard Guy when you don't have the banners hanging up in the stadium, because then the players go, who's this guy telling me to do this and do that? He hasn't won anything. By the way, we do want to give a shout out to Michael Consaccio, better known as Mikey Con down
Yes,
here. He
Michael.
does his own little sports thing. And by the way, he says Mike is my, excuse me, he says Chris is my guy. Chris is my guy. So he's a big fan of Chris Santos. So that's great.
Thanks,
Hey,
Mike.
this time goes by real quick. So in the last 15 or so, we want to get over to the Celtics and see what Andy thinks about that.
Okay.
Give us a call too if you'd like to, Mikey Con or anyone else, 774-301-9432, and speak to Andy Hart, Chris, and myself. Okay, the Celtics, they make this trade. They get Tice back. They get White. I'm watching the game last night. I'm thinking, gee, that White, he seems to gel pretty good. Hey, played with them before and all that, and the USA team. Hey, it's only one game, but I'm looking at the team. They're on a little bit of a roll now. Some of these other teams, the Nets are kind of banged up. Now they made that trade with Philadelphia. It looks like the East is kind of up for grabs. I don't know. What do you think about that? What do you think about this core group? Because, hey, look, Tatum last night, he had 5 assists. Smart had 7 assists. How about, Time Lord there, 16 rebounds, right? So now you throw Tyson in there, get the middle little help. You got the playmaker there in there. I don't know. Are they better now than before that trade, do you think?
Oh, I think they're better. I definitely think they're better. And I have to give them credit. Whatever you think of this winning streak, whether it's, playing low-level competition, and maybe we end up looking at this winning streak like the Patriots winning streak, that 7-game winning streak where all of a sudden in the middle of the year, the Patriots are Super Bowl favorites and they're going back and this and that. And then post-bye, the bottom falls out. They play the Colts, they play the Bills, they play better teams, and you realize, okay, they're not as good as what they were doing in that winning streak. But I got to give I've said for 2 years, Celtics are a 500 team because they've just been a 500 team. That's what, almost exactly. It was almost like, they'd lose 2 games to fall 2 games below 500. And you're like, okay, there's 2 wins coming because I know they're a 500 team. Over two years, that's what they've been. Now they're an above 500 team. And I don't care who they play. They're beating the teams they're supposed to, which hasn't always been the case over the last 2 years.
Right.
I think this White addition in terms of distribution, a point guard that's not necessarily looking to score. I think that fits in well with Tatum and Brown. His defensive energy, I think that's the other thing, it just feels like there's a positive energy around this team. And it's what we talked about so much in sports with winning and losing is energy and confidence. And it's that, how many times have you heard in baseball, they got a great clubhouse? And I always wonder, well, what comes first? The winning leads to a great clubhouse, or can the great clubhouse propel you to some winning? And I feel like the Celtics are at that crossroads where they're a pretty good team. They have the ability to beat a lot of teams that are inferior to them or that have injuries and are banged up night to night. And now they're believing. Now there's a positive energy around the team. And I think Jaylen Brown actually predicted it. I was reading something, and I hate that part of this job now is following social media, and you got to see everything that everybody tweets and Instagrams. And, what does this emoji mean that this guy put on his Instagram? And Kyler Murray doesn't follow the Cardinals anymore. What does that mean? But Jaylen Brown in January tweeted something to the effect like the energy is about to change around here. And it certainly has. I don't know exactly how he predicted that or how he knew that was going to happen. Now, long term, in terms of the end of the season, would I pick the Celtics to beat the 76ers necessarily now that it's Harden and Embiid, even though I haven't seen what that looks like with them on the court together? I don't know if I'd do that. I don't know if I'd pick them to beat Kyrie, Durant, and Ben Simmons, but I don't know what that looks like on the court. I know what the Celtics right now look like on the court, and they look like a team that's playing pretty good basketball that likes playing basketball together.
Well, it's big in the clubhouse, as you said, Andy. And what I've noticed from this team, been the best defense since Christmas. Udoka gets the guy that he wants, that he used to coach at San Antonio, so he's very happy about that. And the point production has spread out on the floor. You're not just relying on Tatum. You're not just relying on Brown. Smart's putting in some production, which is very nice. White's starting to put, obviously, his first game, but he's going to make the production. Now you got Williams in the middle there, getting in production. So it's not just relying on Tatum. It's not just right. So they can spread the ball around a lot more than what they have been doing. And they got a guy to do it with White. So hopefully, figuring game 1, beating Denver, they can now get together, work as a team even more. And I still think they will move up the charts, maybe up to 5 or 4 by the season end, and see what happens in the playoffs.
Yeah, you look at it, I think they're 4.5 games out in the East. I mean, the East is all bunched up. So if you can get hot, and they've been hot, maybe they're due for, a streak to go in the other direction. We'll see how we're talking if that happens. But the point you bring up, last night, Jaylen Brown did not have a good shooting night.
No.
And you won. And that's what you need, is the ability to, because I think everybody knows if you have a night where, Tatum goes for 36 and JB goes for 32, you got a good chance to win that game. They're they're hitting their threes, all of that. Well, that's not real life. That's, there's going to be nights where one or both of them is off shooting nights, especially the way they played this year. Tatum has not shot the ball great this year at times. Can you still find a way to win? Last night was an example where they found a way to win. And, you look at it, I think defensively, points allowed, they're like second or third in the East, and that's with a bad start. They weren't good defensively, right? Early in the year. Now that defense is coming along, and I'm a big believer in basketball that defense is effort. And if you're not playing good defense, it means you're not giving the effort. And if you're not giving the effort, it means there's some sort of emotional disconnect there. Like you're not invested wholly in the team and the process and the belief. When you start playing good defense, I think it means you're trying to play good defense. And if you're trying to play good defense, I think your attitude is in the right area. And I think those things are all going in the right direction right now for the Celtics.
Well, that's been a big criticism of them for such a long time. And when you actually see the assists piling up, moving the ball around, rebounding, doing the dirty work down low, and a little bit more of a chemistry, obviously that's a big thing. Now we're getting a couple of comments over here. Mark Sylvia is saying that he thinks Milwaukee is their biggest problem. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye on Milwaukee. Another question I want to ask you, we only got a few minutes left here with Andy Hart. Down here we're fans of not only Andy Hart and, not only the actual players, but also the talk show hosts, and listening to Andy Hart or Greg Hill or Fourier. And of course, on your competitor station, I've seen you on with Felger and Hawley in the evening a few times. So I look at Felger, right? I'm a fan of Felger, and I'm thinking this man, he is just a maniac. He's always looking at stuff. He's going 100 miles an hour. When you listen to a show, when you call in, he gives you about 10 seconds, cut you off. And he's like, everything's like 100 miles an hour, right? But he seems like he's well prepared and he works hard. What is he like? What is he like in person? Is he one of these guys that he's just thinking sports all the time, morning, noon, and night?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't know if he's always thinking sports, but he's always on the move. Certainly that assessment you have from afar. I can remember he would be, covering games, and he's the guy that's banging out his post-game story, and he's actually got a flight in 45 minutes. He wants to get home to do this. He's got radio the next day, TV the next day. He's always going. He's super wound. I don't know if wound tight's the right word, but just it's always movement. Like he's that Energizer bunny. He's always been that way. And I'm a Felger fan. I've done a lot of radio, even back in his sort of, I guess you'd call it developmental days. We worked together a lot on 890 in Boston, which was a small radio station. He was the host, and I would be on 2 or 3 times a week, and we would fight. He doesn't always like to fight me. He can be a little sensitive there if you push back too hard on some of his opinions. But I'll never question how hard he works, how much energy he puts into what he does, and how creative he is. Like, I don't think he's lucked into the success he's had, and his radio show is the most popular radio show in the country. I mean, I know I'm on the competitor, but I can admit it is what it is. I can see the scoreboard. He's good at what he does, and he engages people. I think he's got a little bit of that old Howard Stern of, half the audience listens because they like him. The other half hates him, but they listen longer because he annoys them so much that they can't stop listening. He's got some of that successful magic to him. But yeah, he's a guy that has worked hard to get to where he is and puts a lot of energy into what he does.
By the way, don't forget to put on WEEI after you're done listening to this, because Andy Hart's going to be on this afternoon from 11 to 2. So we'd be happy to pick up
1 to 4. 1 to 4 I'll be on.
Oh, 1 to 4. I'm sorry. 1 to 4 this afternoon on WEEI. So that's fantastic. By the way, somebody asked before, I don't know if we circled around to it, but we were like, hey, let's get a Super Bowl prediction from Andy Hart.
Yep.
So do you want my heart or my head?
Where's your money going, Andy? Where's your money going, Andy?
Okay, my money would be on the Rams and that defensive front. All the metrics, watching games. We know that the Bengals offensive line is not very good, and we know that the Rams defensive front, led by Aaron Donald, but also Von Miller and others, is very good. I'm a big believer in matchups. We saw a Super Bowl where the Bucs just took advantage of the Chiefs offensive line, and I know we get caught up in superstars and receivers and all of those things, but you can still win or lose in the trenches. I was there when the Patriots lost to the Giants because that Giants NASCAR front was the best unit on the field, and the offensive line wasn't ready for it. Unfortunately, I'm very much rooting for Joe Burrow, big Joe Burrow fan.
Yep.
I think he's the most popular quarterback on the planet right now. My kids love him. My mother loves him. Everybody seems to love Joe Burrow. I think he could be in for a long evening, and I think Aaron Donald could control that game. And Aaron Donald's a Hall of Fame great player. He might deserve this kind of cherry on top of his career. But yeah, I'm going with the Rams and that defensive front to win this game.
How about that, the colorful figure that Joe Burrow is? Not only is he a good player now because he's gone so far in the playoffs. I mean, I admit I didn't watch a lot of Bengals games, but this year as they got better and everything else, you would see them, on the red zone and stuff, and of course in the playoffs and everything else. But how about that shot of him sitting there with the sunglasses on the sideline with the, I don't know, $1,000 coat, smoking a cigar, and I'm like, man, this guy, he's not talking about swag, But then when you listen to him, he comes across confident. But he doesn't irritate you in that cocky kind of way. I know something about the kid that, is definitely colorful and magical. He's got that charisma. He's got that it factor.
He definitely does. And I find now, I know we're in the early stages, and this is what we do, not only as media members, but I feel like a society, we build a guy up and then we'll start taking pot shots at him, especially if he wins. And, who does he think he is? Like all of a sudden the swagger will become cockiness. And because I do believe right now, he might be the most popular athlete on the planet, right? Just this little window of time, everybody has fallen in love with this Joe Burrow story over the last month plus, whether it was the 500-yard game in the regular season and then taking the Bengals. Oh, the Bengals don't win playoff games. They don't win road playoff games. You can't win in Cincinnati. Putting that, and then, he's interacting with The Rock on social media because of the black turtleneck chain look. And he's just, you say it, and it's so hard to define, but it feels like he has it, and he's got that Midas touch. Some other guy might dress the same way and we wouldn't like it, or might make the same comment and we wouldn't like it, but somehow Joe Burrow does it or says it, and we're like, yeah, I kind of like, boy, he's really likable, that Joe Burrow, and that's where he is right now.
Hey,
Andy,
well,
my last question one more question for Andy. Andy, 69 years old. What do you see left for Bill Belichick? How much longer? And what do you think someone to take his place when he does go?
Well, I certainly, on Tom Curran's 5-year plan, I would take the under. I think realistic is probably in the 3-year range,
okay,
plus or minus. Although I'll be interested to see, because I was a critic of the way the Patriots were coached this year. I think they made a lot of mistakes in all 3 phases. I think this may have been his worst overall coaching job as a staff this season, which makes it all that much more remarkable that they won 10 games and were able to accomplish what they accomplished. But I would say right in that 3-year line, he gets to the age of 72, 73. Can he still keep going? As far as the replacement, your guess is as good as mine. I know a lot of people want to say, oh, he wants his son. Well, it doesn't matter what he wants. It's not his decision. If your last name's not Kraft, you don't get a vote in this decision.
Right.
This is an ownership level Jonathan Robert Kraft family decision. Mayo, I'm intrigued that he brought up his ideal dream would be to take over the Patriots. And the timeline might work. He's only been a coach 3 years. We've talked about he's getting head coaching interviews, but is he really ready for that job?
Right.
Maybe behind the scenes. I know he has a great relationship with the Kraft family. Maybe behind the scenes, he starts to get that vibe. I am next in line here. This would be the place I want to be. And Gerard Mayo, if you ever speak with Gerard Mayo, spend time with Gerard Mayo, I guarantee you'll walk away impressed. He is you talk about it. He has it. He's been in the business world, the playing world, the coaching world. You're just left impressed. And in terms of a CEO of an organization, I think you could do a lot worse than Gerard Mayo. So if you force me to pick one with the current timeline, the candidates, why not Gerard Mayo?
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because a lot of us are hoping that maybe McDaniels would be here long enough to follow Bill Belichick, but I think that ship has sailed, so perhaps Mayo is one of the guys in the mix. Let's see. Mark Sylvia says, I'd be happy in a few years if we could see Mac Jones on the sideline with gold jewelry, a fur coat, and smoking that cigar just like Burrow. Yeah, that would be great.
Yep. I don't rule it out. He's got some swag to him. He's got some it factor too. He just needs to win a little more.
All right. Mikey Kahn says Andy is absolutely the best. Well, we appreciate you stopping by this morning. We'll be listening this afternoon. We hope you have a great show. Somebody said, hey, he has a great show on Saturdays when he's on Saturdays. So, hey, a Dartmouth guy up at WEEI. We always enjoy that. We had Peter Abraham on a couple of weeks ago. So
Yeah.
another local guy from our Greater New Bedford area up there at the Boston Globe succeeding, and we're very, very happy to see that. So again, thank you very much for being a guest here on Santos on Sports.
My pleasure. Call me back
Thanks,
anytime.
Andy.
Even if you want to talk high school sports, I'm getting more into high school sports as my son's playing, and I know all his friends. I'm rooting for all the teams going.
Nice.
I've been getting a lot of joy lately out of just going to high school basketball games, hockey games. It's fun.
Oh yeah, that's my sweet spot. Along with Chris Santos, we're still calling local games down
Still
here on
calling
the
games.
local cable. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. All right, thank you again for Chris Santos. I'm Paul Santos, Santos on Sports. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next Saturday. Have a great day.